The top stories, the 3 Apollo Soyuz mission astronauts have arrived in Washington for a White House Awards luncheon tomorrow hosted by President Ford. Justice Department officials said to be considering the subpoena of witnesses before a federal grand jury in Detroit in connection with the disappearance of former Teamsters chief Jimmy Hoffa. And that, friends, is the 9 o'clock edition of the news. This is John Scott reporting for Lester Smith. Next news as it happens, next scheduled news tonight at 11 over WOR Radio 710, The Talk of New York. And now, Gene Shepard, next over WOR New York.
Hello, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, I'll be damned, the light isn't working. This could be dangerous. Our on-the-air sign didn't go on. Just think what I could have said. It really didn't. See, that red light over there, Brenda? See, that goes on me, fine. See, this is connected to the preamplifier, and then it goes, you know all about those things, right, huh? My God, science is fantastic, isn't it? You know, I just have a note here. It says, Shepard, whatever happened to soul food? Oh, soul food. You remember when they always talking about soul food? No. Whatever happened to Rice Krispies? I mean, bring it up, please. Shredded wheat. Yes, that reminds me. Whatever happened to Kahootek? I mean, remember that big thing? Oh, listen, it was a really sad thing about Kahootek. You remember Kahootek, don't you? That Indian chief that you were calling was making Oh, that was another. I'm sorry. That was a politician. But there was a thing called the Kahootek. See how fame is? I mean, even natural phenomena have a lifespan today in this age of the mental yo-yo of about maybe 15 or 20 milliseconds. Whatever happened to Old Faithful? Oh, no. Old Faithful was turned off here about 6 months ago due to rising costs, and Old Faithful just isn't faithful anymore. Just like so many things, But nevertheless, whatever happened to the Whispering Natural Bridge of Webster, West Virginia? Well, you used to hear a lot about that. In fact, there was a song called Natural Bridge, West Virginia. I love to see you standing so solidly. And it's a beautiful tune. It was written by Abe Burrows. It really was. I have it somewhere. I'm probably the only guy in the world who has a copy of Abe Burrows singing Natural Bridge, West Virginia. Terrible record, and that's why I keep it, because I like to remind myself of man's mortality. Perfection always bothers me. Listen, I obey the Greek ideals, which was always to build an imperfection in every thing you do. And those of you who have listened regularly know that I consistently build imperfections in everything I do. Very, very. Well, that's all done deliberately, because I know that perfection would turn you off just terrible. I mean, it's just like, you meet this perfect girl, and immediately you're aware that you've got a tie made out of tinfoil, and and all right, all the bad things. But speaking of Kahootek, I met this friend of mine. Just terrible thing here about 3 or 4 months ago. I go into the Choc Full O Nuts, and I sit down, and there's my friend standing there, and he's looking very moody and chewing somberly on a chocolate brownie. And, it's a kind of sad thing, because he was so ebullient up to this point, you see, because he was one of these guys that he'd go into Choc Full O Nuts at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and he wouldn't come out till 5, and he'd be all chocolate brownied up and staggering down the street and yelling, after all that orange drink and stuff. And so here he was nibbling away at this chocolate brownie, looking bugged, and I said, come on, Stan, what the heck is it? The chocolate brownie is one thing you can rely on in this world. Everything else is, no cal. Everything has gotten to be new, all new. Try it this week. The chocolate brownie remains what it is. Almost indigestible and fattening. And that's something you can count on. And he says, quit talking about chocolate brownies. I said, Stan, there was a time when I could come in here and engage you in conversation for 2 or 3 hours about chocolate brownies. What the hell's happening to you? There are some people you can talk to about booze for hours. Oh, yes, you go into a bar, and it's easy to get a conversation going for 3 or 4 hours about what beer is best. Which is academic. It doesn't make any difference, you know. They keep falling off and hitting their head on the floor and getting back up again, you know. And, I heard a guy described the other day as the kind of guy that thinks Balanchine of the New York City Ballet is some kind of a beer. Well, all right. Yeah, you know, life is the way life is. You know how life is, right? And one thing life is doing to you at all times, it's selling to you constantly at all times, right?
There's something very reassuring about cruising the Caribbean with a crew that traces its seafaring traditions back 1,000 years. I'm George Plimpton for Norwegian America Line. When I tell you there's a touch of yesterday aboard the Saga Fjord, you may wonder what I'm referring to. After all, she's a thoroughly modern ship with electronic navigation equipment and ride-smoothing stabilizers. But being Norwegian, she's manned by a crew to whom sailing is second nature. You can sense the difference, not only in the competent seamanship, but in the service that also maintains the best European traditions. It all serves to remind you that cruising the Caribbean aboard the Norwegian-registered Saga Fjord does indeed offer a touch of yesterday today.
Cruise with Norwegian America Line from Florida. They'll pay your one-way economy airfare or a $50 bonus if you live in Florida. Call your travel agent for a touch of yesterday today.
Oh, okay, let's see here. If you're into elephants, here's an elephant thing here. An elephant thing. It's a book. It's called Among the Elephants, and it's gotten a lot of great reviews. In fact, it was written by Ian and Aurea Douglas Hamilton, and they were out in the jungles of East Africa. And by the way, they have some wild jungles out there, and I was there, so I know. Nevertheless, they did a great book on elephants, and it's supposed to be a classic in its field, and it's called Among the Elephants. And it has fantastic photographs and all kinds of a lot of information about elephants, which are a rapidly disappearing species, by the way. And they got some good reviews, like, for example, Superb from the New Republic. And, of course, they've always been ape over elephants anyway. So, nevertheless, this book called Among the Elephants is worthwhile taking a look at. It's published by the Viking Press. The title again, Among the Elephants.
It's another great day for tennis at the Royal Biscayne Beach Hotel and Racket Club on Key Biscayne,
Oh, wow.
the Caribbean island in Florida.
Wow.
The sun is shining, the temperature is perfect, and the cool tropic breezes are sweeping across our 10-cushion surface courts. You can play all day, and at night, too. Take lessons from a pro, and join a round-robin tournament. There's more than tennis at the Royal Biscayne. There's swimming in a freshwater pool, dining in 3 gourmet restaurants, nightly dancing and romantic evenings. There's golf on 18 championship holes nearby, and all the excitement of Miami just a drive away. The Royal Biscayne Beach Hotel and Racket Club. It's the perfect vacation for tennis fans and their families. For information, see your travel agent or call Royal Biscayne toll-free at 800-325-3535. That's 800-325-3535. The Royal Biscayne Beach Hotel and Racket Club.
Very good, very good. Another example of the tennis madness. Hey, you know, no, really, no, wait, let's be historical about this, gang. And I did not say hysterical. Let's be historical about it, okay? We're in the middle of one of the great madnesses of modern times, and it is. It's a mania, the tennis mania. But you know, this mania has historical precedence. So people think, no, it's not a mania. Tennis has arrived. It will be forever. Don't you believe it? Now you're getting mad already when I'm saying that. But it has historical precedence. Did you know that in the 1920s there was a mania that swept America very much like this, where all the elegant people played a sport, and all the people who couldn't play it went to watch the elegant people play it, which is essentially what tennis is. Because, you know, it costs an arm and a leg and two feet and half of your molars to play an hour and a half of tennis anywhere. Even if you start bouncing it on a concrete sidewalk, a guy will run up and say, "Your time is up, please. There's another quartet waiting." And now the what sport is that, gentlemen? That is correct. That's the first question you've answered since the time I asked you your name. That's very good. And then you had trouble with that one. However, that's right. That's correct. That the sport is polo. And it's going to be hard for you to credit the idea, gang out there, that in fact there's a very famous picture that I have somewhere in my archives of Dilbat pictures, a very famous picture of, guess who is, I'll bet you'd never guess who was the most dedicated polo players in Hollywood. If I told you, you'd flip. W.C. Fields. That is correct. And there's a picture of Fields in his private life. He was not the character that he lived on the screen. That's like, people think that he must have gone around saying things like, "Get out of my way." No way. He was another type of guy. There was a streak of unrepentant elegance in his work, the other side of him. And here was a famous picture of W.C. Fields, Adolphe Menjou. I like that for a duet. W.C. Fields, Adolphe Menjou, John Huston, who's the director, William Barthelmess, or Richard Barthelmess, who's a famous movie star of the period, and I think Greta Garbo and Drag. But nevertheless, here was this crowd out there playing polo. And it reminds me exactly of a group picture of Ethel Kennedy, Robert Redford, Peter Lawford, and three agents, all playing doubles, and everybody going out to see them. Same mania. And by the way, it also involved a sport which was basically limited to the wealthy. Tennis is a rich man's sport, philosophically. This is why it's on all the so-called educational channels. Poor men's sports never get on those channels. No way. And the idea that you're hitting a ball and wearing white shorts gives it culture. If you're hitting a ball and wearing knickers, that's something that they do out at Shea and beer drinkers watch. And that ain't culture. That's what we're against. So, nevertheless, you get into these historical things here, and it's hard to believe that at one time you're going to say, "Whoa, wait a minute, polo was never." Oh, yes, polo was extremely popular. Do you know that polo at one time drew crowds bigger than tennis crowds, people to watch it? As a matter of fact, the polo matches out on Long Island, the polo matches at the Armory, they had them in the armories here, were like the same kind of fanaticism, and all over the country, kids were running around with who didn't have horses even, were running around and hitting, what do they call the ball in polo? All right, what do they call the weapon with which you hit the ball in polo? A what? No, you're thinking of mahjong. That's a although there's some parallel. That is called, what is it called? It's called the mallet. All right. And so they're going around and they're whipping these mallets around, and you could buy mallets, believe it or not. Mallets were sold in every sporting goods store and even in drugstores, the way today they sell tennis rackets. And that's how the polo shirt, which people wear, got popular. The polo shirt became popular during the 20s because the polo sport was tremendously popular. I wonder how many people relate the polo shirt to polo, actual polo, the sport. That's a fact that the people would see these guys play polo. It was a big deal, and they saw these great shirts they wore, and that's a polo shirt. Actually, that's the kind of, just like a football shirt. You know what a football jersey looks like, or a swim tank top looks like. Well, these are all from sports. So the polo shirt became extremely popular because polo swept the nation, and in fact, it was on all the front page of all the sports pages. It's fascinating to read the headline: 10-goal polo player stars yesterday as the Long Island Mustangs defeated the Boston Colts. Yeah, that kind of stuff. And this is the Tommy Hitchcock stars, scores 8 goals. And, of course, people follow these guys around like today they follow Nastasi around. And that's right. And it's hard to believe now, I know it, when you're in the middle of any kind of a mania, it's hard to believe it will be over. You just can't believe it. You say, what do you mean? No way it could be over. Well, just a few years ago, there was a fantastic rage in this country. In fact, it was so big that people would wait for hours. What sport was it? They would wait for hours and sometimes never even get in. They would wait for hours at Madison Square Garden to see this sport, just walking around yucks. And you just never hear of it anymore. It's gone completely. What sport was that? I mean, it's disappeared even. The sport has disappeared like the great auk. All right, I'll tell you what it is. It's the 6-day bike race. Did you know they had 6-day bicycle races at Madison Square Garden? And it was a great mania. And people said, what do you mean? If you were to go up to a guy waiting in line to buy a ticket to the 6-day bike races, that just a few years after that, he would look you right in the eye and not even remember that he went there, much less remember what the sport was. He would, come on. Well, I'll tell you, as a kid, I'll tell you one thing. If you're, you talk about archaic sports. As a kid, my old man one time, I was about 6, and my old man was really into this thing, see, and so he took me to a place in Chicago, which was the Chicago Arena. And now this is no little place. This is where the Blackhawks play. It's a big deal, see, the Chicago Stadium Arena. It's where the Blackhawks play. That's a big stands and all that around there, And they were waiting, thousands of people waiting in line. And the old man took me and my kid brother, and my mother refused to go. She had much more sense than anybody. And we waited in line for hours. We finally got in. And here we are. We're sitting way up what would be the 50-cent seats, at a Rangers game. And we're way up there, back of the loudspeakers where you couldn't see anything, And we're sitting up there, 20,000 people, and they're cheering. And down on the floor where the actual ice rink was. There was no ice rink in there this time. See, this is another sport, remember. Down on the floor, in this tremendous spotlight, were these 4 people playing a sport which was so popular that what they were doing, every move they made, was flashed all over the country, and people were sitting in various places, and they could see it happening on screens. What was the sport? It's probably the only national sport played in tuxedos. That's correct. Would you actually believe that people waited in line to sit miles back to watch 4 people play bridge? And that's correct. It's hard to believe it. And the guy that was the star of the bridge world, there was this. He was like the combined Roger Maris, Ted Williams, Pele of the bridge world. He was down there seeing everybody. Every time he would just go past the bridge mix, the crowd would cheer. He did it with such style. Who was that? Eli Culbertson. Well, it's hard to believe. And guys, as a matter of fact, they just like today, they had bridge professionals, where the tennis professionals are suddenly proliferated. They've come out of the woodwork. See, anybody who can hit a ball more than 20 feet is now teaching people who can't even hold the racket. So the blind leading the blind. You see some unbelievable tennis pros around. Well, in those days, apparently, that the bridge professional became a tremendous big deal, and everywhere people went, they would go to the professional, and they would play a practice hand, and the pro would say, well, now look, when you throw the card out and you say 2 no trump, just flip it with your wrist. Do not just lay it out. This is a psychological ploy which would you please hit the money button, please? Hit it. Speaking of so there will be a day, not too long from now, when you'll find that dusty tennis racket buried at the bottom of the overshoes and all the old worn-out sweaters. You'll say, gee, you remember them days? Sooner or later, yes, friends, you'll own Generals. No tire has ever made it that was not a flag rank. I've never heard of a tire called Corporals. For 60 years, General Tire has been building long mileage tires, and now the 40,000-mile dual steel radial. It's a biggie. It starts with a road-hugging radial fly body, and then 2 strong steel butts. I just read the copy. Are built around the body for long mileage and puncture protection. And remember the song. You can't forget it. It goes through your head all night long, right? Sooner or later, you'll own Generals, I say. Oh, it's the Munchkins. Bring them in. That's the worst recording I ever heard. Bring it out there. Oh, well, I hope the show's better. Candide, the Leonard Bernstein Hal Prince musical, now at the Broadway Theater, has been hailed by critics as the musical of all time. Oh, Candide at the Broadway Theater is a show for young and old, and there are free peanuts for everyone. That'll help it go down easier. Poor Candide. That's just the kind of stuff he did satires on. I made a show that you got to go to see with a bag of peanuts in your hand. All right, friends. Which high-potency vitamin do physicians and pharmacists recommend most? Oh, guess. Theragran, of course, and Theragran M. The first time I read this, I thought that was something you sent to your mother on Mother's Day. And they counted the words. I'm sorry, Theragran M. That's the way this mimeograph machine works in the ditto room here. You can't read it half the time. But nevertheless, these are by Squibb, and the name Squibb on the label means that you have no doubt about the honor or the integrity of the maker. These are true vitamins. 30 free when you buy 100. That's a month's supply for one person. So get down there. The offer is limited. Let's see. You can see this great offer at the Mill Park Pharmacy, 6202 Avenue V, Brooklyn, New York. Oh, another freebie.
Understanding our problems is the first step in solving them, then television news should do more. So says a British TV journalist in the new issue of TV Guide magazine. His ideas on how TV news can help us understand our problems make interesting and important reading. In the same issue, find out how some experts rate crime shows. Many law officials are on record with their thoughts. What do the men behind bars think? TV Guide went behind prison walls to find out what convicts watch and why. TV Guide's cover story offers proof positive that the bite of the vaudeville bug is often permanent. Buddy Ebsen, a hoofer during the Depression, still wants to dance. In spite of his successful TV series, he's getting his old act together. Don't miss this word and picture report in TV Guide, America's biggest-selling magazine.
The new Lowe's Monte Carlo Hotel is alive with life. Watch the Grand Prix from your terrace. Dine on international cuisine in 5 restaurants. Enjoy international stars in the Folie Russe Supper Club. Play roulette at the only in-hotel casino on the Riviera. For reservations at Lowe's Monte Carlo, call 586-5099 or the Lowe's toll-free number in your area. Lowe's Monte Carlo Hotel.
Can one of the founders of SDS, a leader of the peace movement, win the hearts and votes of George Wallace's constituency and also be married to Jane Fonda at the same time? It's an exciting soap opera. That's what Tom Hayden is trying to do in the California Democratic primary, writes Paul Cowan in this week's Village Voice. That's Paul Cowan. Hayden's populist themes appeal to Wallace supporters, but his entry into the political mainstream against Senator John Tunney has aroused suspicions on the suspicious left. Read the fascinating story of Tom Hayden's efforts to turn the radicalism of the 60s into the grassroots politics of the 70s. Will he be happily married? Will the rain stop? Will the flood subside? Read this week's Voice at your newsstand.
I feel so bad I could shout. My Burry cookies ran out. I got the
Burry Blues. Says here, sing with the kid. What is this?
Sit down and cry.
What kind of commercial is this?
I
got the Burry Blues. I got the berries. I got the berries. I ain't got no berries. Berry Blues. I got no berries. I got no berries. I ain't got no berries. Yeah, berry cookies, friends, are sparkling, delicious, good for you. They're mild kind, and they go on easy. They're chocolate chip, they're little round things, and they're great. They're called berries. Berries. And by the way, the King Cullen supermarkets are featuring Berry's best chocolate chip now, sugar or sugar fudge cookies at 79 cents. So sing it out. I ain't got no berries. I say I ain't. That's silly. I said, I'm a grown-up person. Ridiculous. And sometimes you wonder if anybody's grown up. And it's silly. You know, speaking of silliness, though, I'm talking to Stan, see. You didn't think I was going to get back that story, right? The little drama that was played out in the Choc Full O Nuts. And I said, okay, Stan, you can tell me. He said, well, what makes you think I can tell you? Why do people always come to me and say, you can be honest with me? I was, well, I never thought about that, Stan. Come to think of it, I'm not so sure you can be honest with me. He said, all right, okay, now I will level. As long as you're going to level, I'll level. I says, what is it, Stan? He says, that's a long story. I said, Stan, these seats in the Choc Full O Nuts are designed to be comfortable for roughly 19 minutes. When you exceed that, your left foot goes to sleep first, after which your right foot goes to sleep and it slowly creeps up your body until it's your head. He says, now we've been there for 24 minutes and I'm already feeling my left foot. It's dragging on the ground. And he says, all right, I'll tell you. No long story, it's Louise. I says, Louise again. He says, what do you mean again? I don't come around and talk about your women. He says, Stan, you brought it up. I didn't say Louise is giving me trouble. It's you that's getting the trouble. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Well, it's Louise. I said, well, what's the trouble this time? You remember the last time I told you about his trouble with Louise, with the record player? And he fixed it. And she put on all her Merle Haggard records on the record player, and the arm kept throwing them out the window. And she claimed that it was a psychological rejection of Merle Haggard, which represented a psychological rejection of him. And he says, no, it's just this damn turntable that he bought on sale at Great Eastern. And it just, nobody believes anybody anymore. So I says, look, don't tell me about the record player. Is it the tape recorder now? It's worse. I said, worse? Couldn't be. After that last time when she left and went to Chicago for 3 weeks, it's worse than that? So, wow. He says, worse than the time she started to read the Village Voice. I says, oh, boy, that can turn her head. He says, it did for 6 or 7 weeks. She ran away, went to Acapulco with Dolores, came back 6 months later. It's funny, grew a mustache. I said, well, Louise is making it. He says, well, I don't know what she's making it, but she's really bugged this time. I said, what about her brother? I said, her brother? What's it got to do with you? I got to support him now. I said, you got to support Louise's brother? He says, yeah. So why? He's 6'7", weighs 214 pounds, has 4 degrees. He can crush beer bottles just between his thumb and his forefinger. What is it you're supporting him? He says, that damn comet. I says, the damn comet? What do you mean? The damn comet. Her brother Howard has a warehouse just outside of Jersey City filled with 750,000 color photographs of the comet Kohoutek. He has been taking out ads for years trying to sell them. He sold 4 last month at 10 cents apiece. Plus the fact he's got 250 Kohoutek T-shirts. He's broke. I said, by God, Stan, that's right. I hadn't heard of Kohoutek for a long time. Whatever happened to that thing? This was the biggest bust of the 20th century. That's what happened. And now I'm supporting that lout. I says, gee, that's true. That reminds me of a friend of mine. He turned out to 25,000 pewter peace buttons just before the war was over. He also invested heavily in the Age of Aquarius. I said, that's right, the Age of Aquarius. Whatever happened to that one? No, it's gone, I like a lot of things, like the greening of America, all those great things of the past, Eric Siegel and all those guys. You remember that bunch? Oh, yes. Yes. Those were momentary summer madnesses. And then I was reminded I try to, encourage Stanley. I said, Stanley, listen, if you think you're mad at the heavenly bodies, it's enough to, make you hate all comets. That Kohoutek thing, that was a bomb. Worst bomb. CBS tried an entire series. Remember they tried a whole big special on the Kohoutek there? And all it wound up was listening to 2 hours of Edwin Newman complain about the fact that things weren't working, which is all he ever does anyway. And, but they did it 2 hours on the network. And then they took a boat out. You remember the boat when all the people went out to sea to watch the Kohoutek? That's like the famous cruise that was taken here not long ago. All the intellectuals went on a cruise and listened to Norman Mailer complain about how he was sick. And, it was a big intellectual cruise. I said, well, that's part of the madness of the 60s. I still have an invitation to Norman Mailer's 50th birthday, which ranks only with Mike Todd's birthday as the great ripoff of our time. And, it's part of the madness of the time we live in. And but I also was a victim at one time, so I told Stanley to try to encourage him that it's easy to learn to hate the heavenly bodies. And not everybody does. Most people get romantic and all teary-eyed about them. They say Mars, the average guy goes, oh, wow. You say Venus, oh. You say the moons of Saturn, oh. That's the way people are. They're dumb. And so I, having had a little experience with some of the heavenly bodies, I just don't have the same feeling about it. And so I decided to tell Stanley the story. And, within 5 minutes, Stanley sat up straight and he began to eat briskly of his chocolate brownie. He had a hot dog, and he drank 2 more orange drinks. And he even made a smart remark to the girl that was behind the counter, which got him nowhere. But it meant that his color was returning, and his complexion was, he was brightening, and his tail was bushy again. Shall I tell you the story of what happened to me? Well, all right. I am deep in, it's an Army story. By the way, the Army is extremely educational. More educational than anything I've ever been in. I mean, that's why most guys, when you mention the Army to guys, they just sort of give you a long look. They don't say much about it. There's no way to tell a civilian about what it was like. No way. No matter what novels you tell. It's extremely educational. And by the way, not at all unpleasant. Education is very stimulating. It can be taken all different ways. Orally, it can be taken by the pill form. It can be taken by the salve form. The salve is often given at more of our elegant Eastern colleges. That's another kind of education. 3 credit hours, and you get nothing but a little unguentine poured on your head. However, there I was. I'm a cool 18, you see, and life is a blank slate. Of course, I was not aware of that. I thought that the slate was heavily written with deep and profound thoughts, all of which I had arrived at independently, which is a common delusion of anyone who is 18. So, of course, with the exception of the present generation, which have arrived at all these thoughts independently and are profound. All present generations are always exempted from any discussion of a philosophical nature. Correct? Okay. So, nevertheless, there I am. I'm hanging around the company area. We have been in this jungle for probably a year at this point, and I have learned many things. For one thing, I have enriched my vocabulary tremendously. I have heard words used ways that I did not imagine before my entry into the Army that it can conceivably be used this way. In fact, enlarging your vocabulary often means actually numerically reducing the number of words used, but using them with great care, expressiveness, and with full knowledge of their ramifications and multiple meanings. There was a time it would take me 15, 20 minutes to say something, but I learned in the Army I could say an entire thought using 2 words over and over again. In fact, I was once in a company. Did I ever tell you about the company I was in? The most fantastic educational experience I ever had in my life. Seriously. That I was in transit one time, and I was detached from my unit and everything, and I was all by myself. And I was, and when you're that way, you're very vulnerable. This is why guys get to have a certain attraction to and about and loyalty to their unit, because in your unit it's like a family. You know where you are. That's it. But if all of a sudden you're sent on detached duty and you're sent through about 15 different casual companies where you have no place, nothing, you get very nervous. And so one day I woke up in a company that I had arrived to at 2 o'clock in the morning the night before, all by myself, in a Jeep being driven by an angry corporal. The rain pouring down on us, and we arrived at these darkened tents. And the guy says, "There's number 8. I says, is that it? He says, yeah. He said, what the hell are you waiting for? I don't have all night. And so at that point, this is casual talk in the Army. You don't hear this kind of stuff in Army movies. It's buddies always together. Hey, you want to see my picture, my girl? That never happens. He says, what are you waiting for? Come on, move, will you, buddy? So I used the phrase which I learned to use so well in the Army at that time. It refers to a certain celebration that is celebrated by the buddies every week. And you don't know that phrase. Well, you'll have to ask your friend. That comes next semester. It's something your buddies week. So nevertheless, I drag my bead bags out of the back of the Jeep, in the heavy driving rain, and I go into the tent, say, and each tent had a whitewashed number on the side of it. It was 7, 8, 9. Big numbers. I'm not used to this kind of thing, where the numbers are real big, and they say 8. Usually there were no numbers on tents. It's the first time I ran into this. I should have suspected something. It's a big 8 like that. See, so I throw my bag in this thing, and there's about 5 guys in this tent, and there was an empty bunk. Somebody had stolen all the blankets off of it. There was no mattress or anything. So I throw my bags up on the thing there, and I go down to the orderly room, which is lit, and there's this corporal sleeping there behind the desk. And I go in and I say, Corporal. He looks up at me and just looks at me. I says, I'm in 8, and there ain't no blanket in 8 on my bunk. At which point he used the phrase which I had used to the corporal. So I knew there was getting no blanket from this guy that night. So I drifted out into the rain, and I decided to sleep under my barracks bag. Since it was now 22 degrees. And so I did. I laid my barracks bag. I had 2 barracks bags. One I put over my feet, and the other one I put over my chest. See, and I laid on the bunk there, hoping to keep warm under the barracks bags. I'm not kidding you. This is actually the true story. So I had my raincoat on. I slept my raincoat. Well, about 8.5 milliseconds after I laid on the bunk, big cannon goes off. And the walls of the tent from the crash of the cannon, and I stagger up, and I hear in the other 5 bunks, I hear these muffled curses. Another bright day had begun. Of course, it began in Stygian darkness. It was 4:10 a.m. That's when reveille was in this company, and at that point on came a tape bugle. And it went, and then they're playing the Stars and Stripes, and they have 12 million watts of audio, and the tent is rocking from this time. Oh God! I get up in the darkness, and of course I'm totally dressed, so I don't have to put on anything. I discovered everybody else in the tent is dressed. So damn cold in that tent, you slept. Guys went for 7, 8 years in that company, never took their shoes off. So at that point, we go staggering out in the company street, and it's dark out there. And I see this huddled figure. It's the company sergeant. He's looking at a clipboard with a flashlight. And he starts howling out the names. Adams! And you hear, yo! Baker! Yo! Charlie! Yo! And he's going all the way down. And he comes to me. He says, Shepherd! I go, yo! He pauses. He walks around with his light, and he shines it in my face. He said, well, a good look at you. I said, what the hell have I done? At that point, he goes back. He comes back into the front of the company there, and he keeps going on. Wisniewski, yo! Kliberman, yo! Jablonski, yo! Zinsmeister, yo! Company, right. We start marching away. We're going towards the mess hall. The mess hall, by the way, consisted of a long shed that was darkened for want of blackout curtains. It was dark, dingy, and you could smell the smell of frying kerosene, which, by the way, was a very popular frying oil used in the Army, especially on days when we had what was called euphemistically French toast. The Army knew how to make French toast to fit all tastes. Each slice fit every taste. Curious. One half of the French toast was burnt and the other was raw. So if you liked it in between, you cut the little slit, And so we lined up. We go into the mess hall, and I'm looking around. I can't figure out what kind of a company this is. See, this is a wholly alien company, and these guys don't say anything. The only thing they said was an occasional ancient Anglo-Saxon word. All I heard all the time, and I heard it used many ways in this line. And here I thought, after a year in the Army, that I knew how to use these phrases. But this crowd, they were all artists, every last one of them. And they didn't talk to each other. They just sort of isolated and muttered constantly. And we slowly start moving into the mess hall. I'm moving along there, seeing the guy keeps nudging me in the back. He's got a bayonet in his belt. He keeps hitting me with the bayonet handle, and he keeps bumping me. And I turn around, see, and I know what kind of a company I'm in now. I turn around, and before I can say it, he says it to me. All right? So then I start hitting the guy ahead of me with my helmet between the shoulder blades, see. This is a real friendly company. I keep going bumping like that, see. We finally get into the mess hall, and I sit down. Now, the mess hall had all the plates were laid upside down as you sat down at one of the benches. See, the mess hall had benches. They were like picnic tables, 5 guys on a side, right? And so I sit down, see, and look around, wearing my fatigues. And there on top of my overturned cereal bowl was a little box of Wheaties, a single box of Wheaties. You got it? Okay? Everybody had a box of Wheaties on his cereal, and they had a big pitcher of milk down at the other end of the table. And at that point, the corporal, who was up at the front there, the guy who was in charge of the mess hall, he says, "All right, you guys." First mess hall I ever saw, nobody said anything in it. See, just they were silent. It was like being in a prison, you know, where the guys with the cups and all that yelling and pounding on the table. So he says, "All right, you guys, eat." Well, okay, so at that point, just as I start to reach for my bowl of Wheaties, and there was a KP coming down the aisle with a great big tray of French toast, see, I look down at my Wheaties, I start to reach, and suddenly somebody gives me a shot in the back of me who was at the next table. See, I turn around. Just as I turn around, this guy gives me a mean look. He gave me a shot in the liver, I'll tell you. And I said, all right. I said, you know, what you usually say in an Army mess line to this guy, and he says it back with a different inflection. And then I turn back. My box of Wheaties is gone. Somebody has stolen my breakfast. I look, here are these 9 impassive faces looking at me. Have you ever been in a place that was so mean, where they stole your breakfast? I mean, I can understand a watch, your socks even. But your breakfast. So I looked at the 5 guys sitting opposite me, just sitting there with their crew cuts looking mean. And I hunched over my bowl, see? And I reached over and I grabbed, before anybody could do anything, I grabbed the pitcher of milk. I just grabbed it. And I poured the pitcher of milk into my bowl. All of it. In its bowl. See, I poured it in, I drank it without letting go of the milk. I poured it in again. I drank another bowl of milk. The guy down the other end says, "Flash some milk." At which point I used the word again to describe what he should do to himself. There was an impasse, see. It was 10 mean people, tough mean people. Don't think for a minute I'm Woody Allen. I was hard as a rock and twice as mean. The 10 of us just sat there. Finally, I just take the milk and I shove it at the guy next to me. I just shove it in his gut. I says, "Here's your milk." At which point, he answers me in kind. The same word. We sat there through the entire breakfast, conversing in Anglo-Saxon phrases. I spent 1 week in that company, and every night they would go around with flashlights and look under the mess hall for guys that had gone AWOL. That kind of company. Mean. And it turns out, you know what the company was? It was a group of GIs who had been taken out of stockades all over the world, who were illiterate and were being taught to read. That's why they had the big 8. See, they couldn't read a little 8. They had a big 8. See, they says 8. Put up 1, 2, 3, 4 fingers. You put up 4 fingers on the other hand, and that's the 8. That's where you sleep. Little did I realize that at that point they couldn't read, and why the guy stole the box of Wheaties. He didn't know it was Wheaties. It was just a box of something. Could have been anything. Full of wristwatches. The Army's educational friends. Oh, this is WOR New York. Stay tuned for the elegant in conversation which follows.